Hello, this is Travis Marker. I'm with America Francis. We're with Steward Growth, and we're going to do another session of uh, Business Toolbox Startup Toolbox. Sorry, a little messed up this morning. Uh, Today, as we talk about some of the business things that are happening, we're going to kind of follow our normal format, which is to kind of see what comes up. But I thought I would start with a couple of things that at least we've been addressing this week with my own practice. Um, I know that as we deal with marketing and lead generation, that could be a unique idea. When we talk about a lead is anything that is a potential client. So lead generation is the activity that creates potential clients. And this is one of the more intimidating areas for some businesses to explore because it requires you to brainstorm first, who's your client? And then the second part, like, well, where would you find that client? And some people get a little bit lost here because they think, well, I need to go on the internet or I need to go on Instagram or I need to do Google ads. And if I advertise my product, then the people will show up. Well, there is definitely some truth to that, but you also have to know, like, what are you fishing for? Like, who are you trying to reach? Who are you trying to identify? Because all the different lead generation activities connect to hashtags or to keywords or to something that is going to find your client. Um, but I also think that just jumping online is a little bit ahead of the game because we first want to know, who have you dealt with? Like, who do you think is going to buy this thing? And oftentimes, um, it works for advertisers, like people who you would actually pay to go and get your client if you've had some experience with a client, and then you start to engage with that client first, because that client also gives you stories and narratives that you can build upon as you create your content and you advertise. Um, so I'm going to take a break there. Like, America, what are some of your thoughts on your process? Because I know that you have a business that you do, and a couple potentially. So what are some of your experiences with how you identified your client, and then how did you start reaching out to your clients?
All right. It is kind of difficult to know where to start sometimes. My official small business, I started because I found the products first. And I was fascinated by this huge wealth of products. And then once I found the products, I found an online retailer that could help me get my products to the clients. But I also started talking to a lot of parents and teachers and focused on an educational aspect. So I was doing games and educational supplies, and I was focusing on preschool teachers and elementary age.
Okay, so let me back up. So you found a product first, and how did you connect with that product? How did you know you liked that product? Like, how did you know it had potential?
Well, something I like to do is focus on things I'm interested in. So
Okay,
I was
so that's great.
interested
So
first.
so the product was something you had an affinity with, like it was of interest to you.
It was a category of products. What happened was there was a thrift store that was by my kid's school. And so I just went and checked it out, and it was just like a field of treasure because it was in a really affluent area, and there were just a lot of really high quality items that were really reasonably priced. So like brand new things, sealed things, and there were so many. And so I found this online consignment store, and it was really nice with swap.com back in the day because you could just put everything in a giant box and ship it out for really inexpensive flat rate shipping. And then they would take the photographs and make the description, and they did a lot of that type of work. And then you got to set your own prices. So there was a lot of autonomy for me, and they did a lot of the things that would have been time consuming. So, and then well, this business had a lot of elements. So I also facilitated in-person game events for parents and children at the public library. So I got a lot of feedback from the parents there. And then I was getting my Montessori credential. That's actually why I started going to the thrift store, because I had to create educational lessons using materials for my Montessori credential. And then I started selling things at teachers' conferences. So I would take a lot of these learning materials. They appeal a lot to special ed teachers and STEM teachers, things like that, kind of a specialized academic audience. And there was a really good reception there.
So when you come back to the thrift store stuff, why didn't you just go with eBay? Like how did you decide to go with what you call swap?
Swap.com. Well, like I said, the way they accepted materials was very efficient. So all I had to do, they had these massive boxes, like big old boxes, and I could just put all of the items in the box and ship it to them. And I didn't have to list all of those things separately. They handled that. So if I'd done eBay, you kind of have to babysit the postings and you have to ship everything. They would ship for me from this warehouse in Illinois. So I didn't have to do any of the follow-up on that. I didn't have to find the right size boxes. I didn't have to, like, there's just a lot of shipping, handling, packaging, that kind of stuff that I didn't have to deal with this. I
Okay,
just
so
put everything in a
come
huge box and sent
if we
it.
come back to it, so you found a product that you could tell had greater value than what you currently had. So you says, I will buy this in bulk from this thrift store at a cheaper price because I know it can resell at a better price, but I don't necessarily have the time or potentially inclination to list it all on eBay individually. And there's this company that already does that. And so you shipped it all to them, but you also saw this opportunity because you were trying to fulfill a different requirement. So like you're trying to become credentialed. And so it so part of finding product and client and opportunity is having your eye open to different opportunities. I mean, so you took advantage of a few different things in your quest that met your needs. So efficiency, also you had a little passion towards it because you were trying to solve a different problem, and that's how you started. Like your first client was not necessarily a client; it was just you just needed it solved the problem for you. The swap solved the problem for you while you were solving another problem with becoming credentialed.
Yeah, I just found all of these products and I was like, I don't want to buy this stuff. Like, I really like the novelty of finding the fun things, but I was like, I can't buy this for me. I've got to figure out a way to pay for this hobby. And so I was like, okay. So the way I did that was I'd go to the thrift store and I'd find this good stuff. And then I would check the pieces, and the games that were complete, I would send to the consignment. And then the ones that were not complete but still playable, which was almost all of them, I used in my game events, my in-person events at the library. So every time I bought items, I would instantly pay for them that week at the library event because they paid me well. And I had every single week I had an event, and it was, 50 to 80 people. And it was really fulfilling and fun for me. But then I also just paid for all of these products. But so I had the advantage of being able to use all of the products, the complete ones, the incomplete ones. And then in addition to all of that, I set up a game library where people could check out materials and take them home, and they would exchange them at the library game events. So they would come to the library, they would say, this one's fun. If they were part of the membership, they could take them home and then bring them back another time. But the way I set it up was so that if they wanted to keep them permanently and they never showed up at another event, it was not a big deal because I'd already paid for them and they'd already paid the membership. So I just, these were, I didn't pay very much for the product, but they were really high quality. So the moms were all excited that they could use all of these things. But if someone took it home and didn't return it, it was fine. It was built into the model. So you're right. There were a lot of different pieces of it, but it was kind of just like, there's all of this product and how do I pay for my hobby?
Yeah, well, but I think what's important is that when you think like an entrepreneur, you don't think in terms of a box. You think in terms of a variety of boxes and stepping stones and ladders and connectivity. So you are solving multiple problems by the way you solved your problem. So you'd say, well, I see an opportunity in the whole games because the whole games could be sold. So I'll send those. I don't need a whole game. I just need a partial game for my credentials and this experience. But I'm also being paid to get this experience by the library. So you solved that problem as you're also getting credentialed. So you had two different streams of income that were created as you were just seeking to become credentialed.
Yes.
But then you're also building a portfolio because now you have a collection of stories through the teaching opportunities and through the credential process. So I anticipate you eventually became credentialed.
Yes, I did.
Okay. But then the next thing is you didn't necessarily, you were not limited to just Montessori after the credentials. Like you still could have done your own teaching opportunity perpetually, right?
Yes.
Isn't that exciting?
I love this stuff. I'm always looking for interesting projects and interacting with people and
Yeah.
learning.
So if you think about the library credential, you did you stay with that process or you eventually gave up?
Montessori.
No, no, the library where you were working with the parents through the library.
So I did that for 2.5 years, and then I moved to Utah, and it was less enthusiastic of a response. So I've done some events here, but out there they renewed every single time. As soon as I finished one set, they would just renew again. And I did summer activities and gardening and lots of different types of things.
Okay. And we're just exploring a sideline here, but is that something like that what you were doing? Couldn't that be a class that you could also like still teach, or is there a way that it could still be virtual or still be something that could be a subscription model for those classes?
Well, what I did was I put all of these games on a table, and the parents would come up and choose things that they were interested in. And I would explain the rules, or they would say, my kid needs to learn this thing or is interested in this thing. And I would help them select games. And then they would just take them and play on their own. So I wasn't supervising any children, they handled all of that. But they were really excited about it. So the kids would wait for me and they'd all kind of swarm and they would ask the librarians when I was coming. So I don't know that it would be as great online because there was a really nice hands-on and parental interaction component that they wouldn't have. Like I could show interesting games, but they wouldn't be able to play. I think it's better in person, but there are certainly online classes I could do about related topics.
Yeah. So I mean, what I'm saying is like the process you went through to find the game or discover the game or share with the kid the game. I mean, it's kind of it's not exactly reading Rainbow, but I mean that's a little bit like what was happening in our youth, where Lamar would find these books and he would make us excited about the books so that we would go to the library and get the books, right? Or we'd go buy the book because we wanted to have the butterfly in the sky experience with books. So I think that
Certainly I could do that.
yeah, I
I
think
would
there's
love to do
definitely an
that.
educational opportunity. So then, but then what you're also doing is that as you were doing it before, you were creating like the parents were your leads because you created integrity with them, you created trust with them. They knew that, I mean, their kids were creating relationship with you, and that relationship um, puts you in a position of trust with these parents by way of the product also, right? And the experience.
Yeah, that was actually a really good way to find people because the library was marketing the events for me and people were normally at the library anyway. They were coming. Actually, one really nice thing that the library liked was I put on these events at the same time as story time. So kids who could sit and listen would go sit and listen to story time. And all the wiggly kids, the kids that wanted to be all over the place, would come play games with me. So they had a ton of people come because either way, the kids' needs were being met. And the parents wanted their child to be happy. They didn't want to have to sit them down if they were wiggly. So the quiet parents were glad that quiet kids were at story time and everybody else came and played games with us. And then the parents also developed relationships with the other parents where they'd have that ongoing event that they enjoyed together. So it was really nice to have the library's help in drawing people in.
Yeah, but so we're gonna step back and summarize some more things here. So it sounds like were creating opportunities to solve problems for the library. So one, it was helping you get exposure, but by way of doing something with the Wiggly kids, you were able to create a different service that the library was able to help accommodate their patrons. And so sometimes business opportunities are ways that you just solve people's problems,
Mm-hmm.
and you create little micro ways that you can make some money at that. Um, and I think that's tremendously valuable, because when I started my law practice, and as I've talked to other lawyers who started their law practice, they'll come in and they'll be super daunted because they're like, well, what am I going to do? And I'm like, look, you don't sell a vacuum. Like, you have permission to solve people's problems, and you get to charge for that. So even when I very first started my practice, I had not yet specialized. I just had started my practice. I had no idea what was going to happen. And so I just went and met with a bunch of lawyers and they were lawyers I trusted, or we created friendships. Like, usually you'd go to lunch just so they would know, okay, you're a young lawyer. And the the basic rules were you just get all their garbage. So as soon as people call them and they don't do that type of law, they said, we'll call this guy. And so most of the cases I started initially were cases nobody else wanted, and I would charge for them. But then what was also cool is I would go back to my community of lawyers and I'd say, well, this is the type of case, I've never done that. Have you have anything on that? And they'd
Mm-hmm.
say, sure, you could go and read this case or read this whatever, or here's somebody else who has some experience. So my community was willing to help kind of incubate me by way of getting exposures, which I think is also super important, is that when you start a business, it's good to have people that are like-minded, because like the library was like-minded, the Montessori was like-minded. So you had other people you were probably connecting with as well as you developed your model. And that's exactly what I would do. And even like Napoleon Hill talks about having your mastermind group, which is like your round table of people that you would sit with and explore, this is where I'm at in my process. How would I build upon that process? And then your community helps you develop that model around some of the things you're solving, which could be problems or it could be whatever. Even as I called one of my clients in Nauvoo and I said, hey, this is what I've just done with the nonprofit. Help me solve a problem. He says, well, I'll help you solve a problem by you solving one of my problems. And that's some of the conversation is not about how do I just get clients. It's often about how do I solve problems. And Zig Ziglar makes the comment, you can make as much money as you want as long as you're helping other people make as much money as they want. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, that's not exactly, but the idea is if we're solving problems and being collaborative, then there's definitely going to be ways that we can build upon experience or upon whatever it might be. So I know that since COVID has happened, it seems like there would have to be ways that people could virtually engage in that model. There would have to be a way that we could fill that gap a little bit.
I wanted to make a few comments. One of them was I did loans like that when I got into doing home loans. Like you were talking about how the lawyers would give you the cases they didn't want, and I would take the loans that other people didn't want. And that's actually a really good way to get started, because some of them are more difficult or more time consuming, and you have to learn how to solve some of the tougher problems. And then when you get easier problems, that's really pleasant. If you get enough experience, then you can start handing off the ones you don't want to new people. Um, but I also wanted to backtrack a little bit and mention that I started my games business at the library by volunteering. So I said, hey, I have all these games and I think it'd be really fun to do this. And I asked the librarian if I could set it up at the table and do it. And she said, you can get paid for this. You just sign up and this is how you do it. And then after that, she actually gave me at least one or two raises. She said, I know that this is what you're asking for, but we pay more and I want to pay you more. So that was really nice too, that she recognized that there was a standard rate for that. And she brought me on for that rate. She said, your events are very valuable to us, and I'd like to show you our appreciation by compensating you the way other people are compensated.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so because you were willing to volunteer, that helped build some of your trust and integrity inside whatever you were doing. And then you solved a problem. and you were willing to solve the problem less, but because they actually had it built into their budget to pay a standard rate, then they're like, why don't we just treat you like a normal person?
A business then. Back then, I hadn't started all of my business paperwork and worked out all of those details. And then the advantage for the library is they got to prove my model before they had to pay me. So when I went and people started really coming, like they were drawing people from all over the place. Like I said, we counted people and I had between 50 and 80 weekly for 2+ years. So they were accomplishing their goals, but before they started paying me, they could see that it was really popular.
But another thing that libraries are often looking for is the programs, right? So like if they have programs that are actually catching people, like that's definitely solving a problem because they're not bringing in programs that they have to try out after you showcased it. They know it's a program that works, therefore they already know that they're going to have program satisfaction, which is going to fit into their model.
Another thing they did was they had one gardening event at their branch, and then it was really successful. So she told other librarians at other branches, and I was able to replicate that event at several other libraries. And I just used the same material. So I had the supplies already. I already had it all planned out, and I just did it at a few other locations. And that one paid really well. It was $200 for a 1-hour event. And because she was telling other people, I was able to do it with very little extra effort. I was able to go and do it again. And then the next year, right? Like
Yeah,
it's a multiple year thing.
very cool. And was the branch in a busy city or a small or rural or
I mean, the Bay Area is pretty populated. It
so you're
was
in
a
San Francisco?
suburb. It wasn't in downtown San Francisco. It was in the East Bay, but it was by a BART station and light rail station, and there were plenty of people.
Yeah, so somebody like is listening to this, some of this is market economics. Like so like if you're in a very small town, they may not have a budget for this, but that doesn't mean you couldn't maybe start the volunteer process and as people show up, they couldn't create it into their budget as they maybe shared it with their board about how successful the program was being. So because I'm definitely volunteering and getting the data first, because the people attending is the data that they can now share with their board to justify the expense. Like that definitely makes sense. Where if you're in a place like San Francisco that probably has a better budget, it maybe doesn't have to take as much. They probably just need programs. So they're just like, we have money to spend and we need to spend it. And but we also want to have quality programs. So the fact that yours was quality probably made it, a lot easier for them to justify it to their board or whoever that they're adding you in.
I don't think they had justified it at all. I think the librarian got to kind of pick what her budget was, but I was a credentialed Montessori teacher by then. I had a lot of experience with children and what they liked, and the materials I was bringing were very high quality and interesting. The kids really were, even if you just looked at the qualitative or subjective kinds of indicators, if you could see that the parents and the kids were really happy and excited and came. I guess you did have the numbers as well, but they just enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah, that's very cool. Um, so then when you came to Utah, why didn't it cross over as well?
Well, I didn't have the same one key librarian person, but I'm not exactly sure what it was. I think California had a really big sharing community philosophy back then. The reason I was looking for swap.com was I was interested in kind of so the game library is like a tool library. It's like something where people share items and checking in out, things like that. So there was in that area kind of more maybe acceptance of used items, or I'm still not really sure why Utah didn't take off. I don't know if it was because they didn't understand what it was or because the parents didn't have that same type of relationship with the library doing those types of events.
Did
I
you
don't
go
really
through the
know.
same process? Like, did you go to a library? Were you willing to volunteer to start the program? Like, or how did you pilot it in Utah?
I just signed up as a vendor and put the description in there. And then I did do a few events, but it it didn't work. It wasn't the same. I'm not exactly sure.
Was it connected to a story time process, or was it like a job fair? Or
No, it was just a standalone event.
so it
And
didn't
they
take
have
it.
some other events. They have some ongoing Lego events and some, I don't know.
So it sounds like some of the things that didn't exist that weren't like the same was you didn't have a key player, like a person that you had a relationship with. You didn't have the same setting by way of the story time or the counterbalance to a we need quiet kids and then we need so it and then it doesn't sound like the format by way of just like you were part of there was other options, but you were not necessarily a priority in those in that option. Like you weren't a focus of the library. They weren't trying to help you succeed because you weren't solving their problem.
Yeah. And I was really disappointed because I really enjoyed those events. And they paid really well. It was a constant income for a while. And in fact, it was so flexible that they let me take Catherine with me. So I was working and I had my baby with me. It was very, very flexible.
Yeah. So it sounds like setting is also part of the opportunity. Yeah, that's
Well,
very
and
cool.
sometimes when you switch like that, it doesn't work and you have to try something new. It doesn't always work in the new context.
Yeah, well, and I've talked about, you and I are both mediators, and I've talked about how Oregon and California are not Utah.
Mhm.
But like Oregon and California, where they have a lot more mediation built into their systems, because you somebody might say, well, it's the people who matter. Well, it does matter a little bit, but it's also just like you also identified the philosophy of the place. So since California and Oregon have really adopted mediation into their systems by way of the courts and by way of neighborhood programs and community programs, people are more into like intellectually and institutionally paradigmed towards mediation because they know it's available and it's a resource and people are using it. And it's not like you have to teach people how to use it. People know you can use this program. In Utah, they've tried to push um, mediation, but it's still not become a community-based idea. It's not necessarily a neighborhood concept. It's definitely pushed by the courts, but people still are a little bit more resistant to it because they just don't get how it fits. Where maybe in California, Oregon, there's definitely not that same resistance. So somebody starting a mediation practice in Utah has to go against the fact that the population just hasn't really been taught or told to go to it. And so that's one part that, like, when you're starting a mediation practice here versus in Oregon or California, you're working against just the community paradigm about the product.
Yeah, I will say that my business did shift when I came to Utah because I realized that it wasn't going to work that way. And so I shifted to sales events and the teachers' conferences, and I did quite well there too. So I did several years at the Montessori Teachers Conference, and there was a preschool conference, and then there was a really big Thanksgiving point fundraiser for a nonprofit. And it was right before Christmas. Maybe not, maybe like November something, but it was really also popular. So I went from the swap.com actually got a lot worse. Like it became less of a good deal to work with them. So I shifted away from the library, I shifted away from swap.com, and I found a different channel, which was these teachers' conferences. And then COVID messed up all the teachers' conferences. So I haven't iterated since COVID really with that business, but I was able to shift from California to Utah and find something that worked.
Okay, but this is also super important. Like sometimes when you're starting a business and your clients are one way, you have to be open to how do you adapt when the market changes or the product changes or whatever changes. So, because like with COVID, you mentioned COVID, the law changed because people were used to having in-person visits with their attorney, but now they had virtual visits. But that also helped lawyers out because we were now meeting with people all over the state and even outside of Utah because nobody had to come visit us. And,
Mhm.
and people had now become conditioned to the market. And so they adapted. That was forced upon us. So it wasn't because Zoom existed before COVID, but the market forced the adaptation. You were in the situation where the market changed and also the vendor changed and some of the interest changed. So your clients are changing. But you went through the valuable process of saying, well, my product's still valuable. Where else could I find a spot for it? And so you found another place that was already hot, like the teachers' conferences or the places that you could sell the product. Now, you could have potentially have done multiple streams at one time, but you were just the catalyst for the change was that the client and the vendor changed. So you just said, I still have a good product. Keep thinking. And as you brainstormed, you found something else, which I think is super important. The adaptability in small business is critical that you have to say, if my product is valuable, how do I find the place where it will be at home? Because like, for example, I like to take pictures and I think I take fun pictures, but there's some places that the picture resonates and there's some places that it doesn't. You know, like if I'm in a small town and I'm taking pictures of that small town and I put those pictures in my hometown, which is not that town, they will not matter. Like I might say, oh yeah, that's interesting. But it's interesting when I find the venue that they actually resonate with that picture. Also, I get a lot more likes, I get a lot more attachment, I get a lot more connection because I'm connecting with something that's happening in the audience that is already going on. Like I don't have to recreate that energy because they already have a passion towards the thing that's happening.
You ever sell your pictures or submit them to contests?
I've not necessarily got into that. I looked at that a little bit, like with Etsy and stuff, but I don't know, I just didn't have enough passion for it. Like it was more time consuming than I had a passion for. And it was also not the same cost benefit analysis. I did find a barbecue place up in Morgan that had a train theme, and they did accept one of my canvases. That guy, there's a like one of my pictures. He thought it was pretty cool. I didn't sell it to him. I was just more like I was just grateful that people would see it, and so I gave it to him. Um, if I had enough passion, I'm sure I could figure that out. But there's so many artists like I think are struggling, and I think some of it is if you're struggling at the thing you love, that's a conflict because it doesn't mean it's going to make money. Where if I'm already making money and I do something I love, then I don't have the same conflict about giving it away because there's no cost benefit for me to like I'm getting a value out of it being seen. So who knows what'll happen? But the barbecue is actually super good. It's called the Box Car up in Morgan.
Mm.
Um, I think it's called the Smoking Box Car. But I got some barbecue there that it was out of control. Like I asked for a chicken breast, and I don't know where that breast came from because it was like half a chicken. Like I got, and I sometimes I'll just get two chicken breasts because I like, I'm thinking about 6 ounces of meat, maybe 9 ounces of meat, and I think it was like 18 ounces of meat. So it was like, it was so big, but it was really good. It was definitely worth eating.
You know what I would like to see? I would like to see a class like this about food because you have a lot of really interesting food preferences and ideas, and I think we could do an interesting conversation about food.
Yeah, I agree. I think food is interesting. I also think the sciences of weight loss are really interesting because the marketing material is often so full of interesting information that's not necessarily true. Like when you see somebody who says like, here's your 30-day to fit exercise, if you actually look at most material, it's impossible. Like if you're 300 pounds, you're not going to be shredded in 30 days. You would probably go through a variety of different health crises if you were losing that much weight. in 30 days. But what would happen is it is a mental connection, right? It's the lead generator is this company is going to solve my problem. So if we're talking about marketing, right? If somebody's telling me something that seems potentially, because if they said in 2 days, we wouldn't believe it. In 30 days, it's enough out there that the hook is that there's enough tension in the goal that it might be possible. So
The
the lead
problem
gen,
with weight loss stuff in a food conversation is it can get to that feeling of deprivation and not abundance.
correct.
So I would want to have a conversation about food that wasn't, um, I'm looking for a word and it's not coming to me, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, well, this is also lead generation. This is like what you just said is I'm looking for a lead that I'm looking for a person who can solve my problem in a way that I like.
Mm.
And
I want
so,
to focus on abundance and not scarcity. There's the word.
yeah,
So if people are talking about weight loss, I think a lot of times they focus on the scarcity of I can't eat this and I can't eat much of
correct.
this and I can't eat during this time. And what
Yeah,
I want to do is let's add more vegetables. Let's eat at the right time. Let's frame it in a way that's really positive so that
yeah,
you get to eat the things that you like. I ate an avocado today. Love avocados. They're super healthy. Let's eat avocados and not talk about all the things we can't eat.
yeah, yeah. So like if somebody's listening to what you just said, you're saying I'm this kind of client. This is if somebody could offer me this product and solve my problem, then I am your ideal client. Which is why people will look at like when they do a Google search, they'll say lose weight while eating ice cream, or they'll say lose weight while eating French fries and hamburgers. And I was even scrolling yesterday on Instagram, and a, a thing said you like let's just be straight. You can lose weight while eating ice cream. You can lose weight while eating French fries and hamburgers. You can lose weight, but the question is, well, what is the counter thing, right? What's the counter reality? Is that a hamburger is a calorie, right? It represents a calorie thing. So if you want to lose weight while eating a hamburger, you have to expect that you also have to put in the effort, the counter effort to address that calorie quotient, right?
That doesn't sound very manifesty. I think you can eat hamburgers and not worry about it.
Potentially. But that's the way I embrace weight loss and fitness is like I look at the Atomic Habits book and it talks about incremental change.
Mm.
And so I would build in hamburgers, or I don't really build in hamburgers because I don't necessarily enjoy them. I like steaks though, which is actually easier because of the way they're cooked. I don't ever really build in French fries there because I appreciate that the salt is amazingly tasty, but I know that it's super difficult to overcome a fried food.
Mm. Only
Like you,
because you think it is, Travis.
no, I know from experience that there's just so much fat in a fried food that it's difficult to overcome that calorie quotient.
Because you think that it's difficult. I'm going to push back on that a little bit.
Okay, well, I do think it's difficult because of the amount of exercise I've put into overcoming a fried food. I agree that it's not impossible. Like if I wanted to live on a fried food diet and just embrace it, I definitely probably could still lose weight. I would also have to really embrace that challenge because I appreciate that there are just mathematical and scientific issues with losing weight.
Letting yourself get tricked by reality thinking, huh?
Yeah. Well, like I do like I enjoy ice cream, and so like I build ice cream into my week. I build irregularly. I build a pizza into my week. Uh, like
Irregularly?
like into a month. Like I might have a pizza like once a month, or because um I think that when you're trying to manifest things, um, particularly in a small business setting, I think you can't. There are often miracles that happen by way of things aligning. Like a lot of the things you did were not luck. They were the fact that your brain was aligning towards solution-based creativity, right?
Mhm.
But there were still just realities that were part of that solution-based creativity. So if I want to say I want to make $1 million selling pornography in Salt Lake City, it's possible, like, right?
Example, Travis.
Well, I mean, it's the same type of thing. Like there's you can't say I want something to happen that is potentially impossible for the market. It doesn't mean it's impossible, but like if I want to uh if if I want to sell meat in a vegan town, it's not impossible.
Okay, well, we're getting too far into our strategic manifestation stuff. We should probably focus on the
No,
small
no,
part of
no,
it.
but I also think what you're saying though is also relevant to lead generation. Like if I want my ideal client to be a billionaire and I'm selling $1 product, why would a billionaire be close to my lead? Like why would my lead be connected to that person? Like if I if I want to if I want to sell fast food, why would I advertise at a health food store? Like I have to create the bridge that it works out. That's why McDonald's sells salads, because they want people to, and McDonald's is phenomenal. Like they want people to feel like it's okay to eat their food, so they put a salad on the menu, right? And I think like lead generation is super powerful. But that's why you have to figure like air fryers are phenomenal, right? Because you're eating a food that is now not cooked with oil. How many people like dove into that because they're like, I get to eat a fried food that's actually healthy for me.
Yes.
So coming to what you were identifying is it is possible to eat a fried food. I just have to solve a different problem, right?
I think you put up obstacles that are unnecessary, but that's not my problem.
Well, I think you're absolutely correct. I think we all put up obstacles that are potentially unnecessary because it's just currently where our brain's at.
Because that's what you believe.
Yeah, that's just where my paradigm is. But as
Mhm.
soon as somebody solves my problem with a different paradigm, like an air fryer, I move on, right? I can embrace a new thing. I just have to be open to that and just say like, well, where's my brain currently at in my weight loss process or in my weight loss whatever.
Yes. So we could talk a lot about attraction stuff. I want to take a second and talk about subject matter experts,
Yeah,
because part of understanding what the realities are is talking to a person, a coach, somebody who's been there, who's already done it. So if you can talk to a person who is farther along, you were talking about your community helping you when you were a new person. I think it's really useful to talk to people who know the realities, because there are all of these unknown unknowns. And you're like, hey, I want to do this thing. And they say, you can. These are some things you might want to consider. And you say, oh, well, I don't know how to deal with all that stuff, but they do. So they can connect you with other people or information. So, and even with the confidence thing, right? Like some people would say, I could never do the small business. Like, I'm not. I'm not a businessy person. And you and I both know that what we're doing with this incubator is we're getting people who have skills and who have knowledge and interests and whatever. And we support them with that fear or whatever. Like they don't know how to solve those problems of getting it set up, but they have the valuable products. And all they need to do is get connected with the right people. And then they can move along that path. And part of the problem is just that not recognizing that it's not a big obstacle. They can do what they need to do and become business owners or start their side gig or whatever. They just need a little support.
yeah. Well, and again, since we've kind of, I'm trying to stay a little bit in that theme of the lead generation, but you're exactly correct that if you go to people who know your product or are familiar with your product, they will help you shape that lead by way of mentoring you around the obstacles or the way you're seeing your product, right? Because just like you have, like we just in this brief conversation, even just about food, the exploration of the idea creates other ways to see the thing.
Mhm.
And so like you're saying, going to subject matter experts who are actually familiar with the thing or sell the thing. Like the librarians have a problem they need to sell. The teachers had a product they needed to receive or sell. Um, Going to the people who are at least my audience for that product, who are, or I think might be my audience for that product, helped me shape the way I could address how it's presented to the people who I might want to buy it or develop it with or whatever. Even with Lisa um, Wayman, she's the person we use a lot for our lead generation and our networking. I said, I was having a conversation. I said, well, how would you market this thing that's happening? And she says, I need to think about how to describe it because as a lead generator, like she's the person creating those leads, she does have to think about the audience who would want to hear it in a certain way, not necessarily just in the way it's happening. Because sometimes you have to say, well, this is what's happening. And if you go to Alabama, they're like, oh, that's what we call blank. And if you go to New Jersey, they're like, oh yeah, that's what we call blank. And and I'm like, well, that's fascinating. Well, this is what I call it. But as soon as you get the language around the experience uh, um, to fit, then that's how you can market that idea, or that's how you can press that idea.
And I think it's difficult when you're starting a new idea because people don't know that they want it.
Right.
So if you're doing, if they haven't had this item before, they don't know that it's awesome. They don't know that they need it. They've maybe been doing it another way, but your way is so much better. And it's tricky to start that whole conversation, whether I don't know if you just need a viral video of somebody doing it or,
Yeah. Well,
it can
I
just be
think that
tricky.
yeah. Like I think that like the dance, the floss. Have you ever learned how to floss?
Oh, yes. I have
When
children.
when I first saw it, I was like, what is happening?
Yes.
And they're like, yeah, it's the floss. Well, as soon as somebody made that popular, then you can floss, right? But there did have to be an identifying experience around that dance move, right? Then it's marketed and it's branded and people are doing it. And maybe, the right people did it on, I have no idea what the current thing with it. If you watch a music videos, that just like on YouTube now, because it's not MTV anymore. Like there's VH1 or whatever. Like you have somebody popular does the thing. Now they're like,
TikTok
there you go, TikTok. Somebody did the first floss on TikTok, right?
sounds like a thing.
That's awesome. Um, I think that also one of the people who make one of the experiences that people or what do you call this? Mistakes people make in lead generation is spending too much money on it.
Oh, yeah.
So if you don't know if it's going to work, then don't spend a bunch of money on it. Like that was the super important thing about your volunteer activity was you were probably doing what you could afford to do. It was creating trust, it was creating experience, it was creating connectivity. So it basically cost you time, which most small businesses definitely cost you time anyway, but it didn't cost you anything financially other than buying some product. And the total cost of your product might have been $50 before you got hired.
Yeah, I was buying those games for like $2 each, and I could have used the same games every single week at the events.
Yeah, so maybe you invested, 50 maybe $50 in startup costs, and then you started being paid $200 a session.
Well, it
So
wasn't 200 for those, but the gardening ones were 200. But I
okay,
think it was 75 every class and it was weekly. So I anytime I bought games, I always paid for them the next time I did the event. They were all paid for.
yeah. So perfect example. When I first started my law office, we thought we would primarily use phone books, which are gone. So and the phone book advertiser would come in and try to sell you space, and the phone book can tell you how much you had to spend and what your thing would
Mhm.
be and whatever. And I had no reference for what my clients would pay me. So my first year, I was basically working to pay my phone bill. But then a while later, there was an attorney in the community who said a lawyer's service should be their advertising. Like the community service should be the thing that creates business for the lawyer.
Mhm.
And I thought, I'm going to do that. So I actually went back to what you just did. I volunteered some places, and I also made sure I took more time and effort to just be present with people and connecting with people and engaging with people. And my referrals went up, and I made a lot more money, and I got out of the phone book. So basically now I am my advertising is all the free lawyer directories. So I just make sure I'm present. I'm in all the free lawyer directories, and I do not pay for any advertising other than I pay for my website. And I do not have any paid campaigns or anything.
You've
And
arrived.
yeah, it definitely worked out. But I had to invest in time and presence versus money campaigns to build my business, and it worked out.
And your time is worth money.
My
So
time is definitely worth money. But I think that what you did is super valuable. By the way, I think we have to do stuff that creates interpersonal connectivity, and that will help build your brand more than just paying for it.
mm,
Like, 'cause I think people have to psychologically engage in the product so that they'll say this is valuable to me.
oh yeah.
We're getting close to an hour. What any final thoughts on what you maybe have learned from lead generation or how you get your clients? What about in your loan business? Like how do you build integrity and connectivity there?
Well, it's the same kind of thing you said. I try to go the extra mile to treat my clients the best. Like I added another, I work for a broker. So we shop lots of different loan companies to get the best loan. And I started a relationship with an entirely new loan company one time just to get the best product for a client. And she was really happy and sent me a referral. So that was really good. I do loans part-time. So it's a little bit slower than some of the other activities. Same with mediation, actually. I'm currently in the trying to get up and going with mediation, and I appreciate the efforts by community members to mentor me and include me in their work. So
So
thank you for that.
yeah, no problem. But if we come back to your loans, like if you wanted to do it full time, you still could create a campaign around that.
Yes, I could. I mean, I am a little bit less confident about my loan lead generation at the moment,
Okay.
but it's the thing I
So
do.
so if we're talking about your what was the word you used about weight loss? You're dealing in realities.
Yeah.
So how would
Yeah,
you
I've got my hangups, I've got my obstacles, I have my thinking errors.
do you have a passion for it?
I think I don't.
That isn't that the truth? I think that that is the
I think I
biggest truth
don't.
around our I think when we deal in realities, I think for me, I've found that my passion to overcome the reality is less important than the problem, right? Because sometimes it's just more like, am I in the mood to solve the problem?
That's one really big advantage I have with working with Steward Growth is on my downtime, I'm just spinning new ideas and I'm excited to talk to the people and I've got the projects I'm working on, and it's not about any kind of external pressure to do it. I'm just interested in it and I want to do it. And I think it will be great. And I'm excited about the possibilities. And
Yeah, yeah.
it's it's fun for me. I like to have fun.
Yeah, no, I like to have fun as well. I had a conversation with another person, and she said, "How do you just know that you're in your purpose?" And I just think like when we think about lead generation, like if I'm advertising to people I don't even want to work with, I'm not in my purpose.
Yeah.
if I'm I go to work every day and I actually hate my job, I'm not in my purpose. Now, that doesn't mean that you may not do your job just because you have to pay your bills. But if you're if you're trying to create a business that you don't actually like, it's very unlikely that you're going to find the solutions to the problems or to the leads or to your clients because you're actually repelling them by not wanting them.
I like doing loans.
Yeah, well, which is good. I mean, like it's good, but like you identified, if there's something about it that you're not connecting with, it prevents you from excelling at it because you just like it's not super important that you excel at, which
Yeah.
is that's totally fine, right?
It's
So
not totally fine. Loans pay really well.
yeah, they
I
pay
have
well,
to
but
figure out how to connect what I like to
yeah.
do with the income.
But I guess if as we're talking about a small business owner, being honest about your feeling about your product is important
Yeah,
because you can't excel at something that you don't actually like.
I can't.
I think most people cannot. Like, I think there's enough books and literature out there about um we manifest things that we want into our life. Unfortunately, we also manifest things into our life that we just always think about, even if we don't like them. Like if we want conflict or we hate conflict, but we're always thinking about conflict, it seems to show up.
That makes me nervous though sometimes when I'm focusing on divorce mediations and I'm like, I really like helping people and solving problems and all this stuff, but is all their conflict going to bring more conflict? I don't want to be all in that negative space. But right now it's working okay as
Yeah.
long as I keep it balanced with other things that are less conflicty.
Yeah, but I think some of that's also shaping. I don't necessarily like divorce and conflict, but I like helping people find peace.
Yeah.
So now instead of helping people because they have conflict, they do have conflict, but you're helping them work through it to bring peace, and it's a different way to think about it.
I really enjoy helping people solve problems and find peace. That's very meaningful
I totally agree.
and gratifying.
All right. Well, I think that, we've had an excellent discussion. I appreciate it, America being willing to banter and explore with me. And it's always fun to collaborate. She adds a lot of value to Steward Growth and is the director and does a phenomenal job for Steward Growth. I love being a part of the product and the model. Um, we do have this program once a month. So uh, I believe this is Tuesday. So it's which Tuesday? What Tuesday is this? It's the third Tuesday.
I can look at my calendar. It's the third
The,
Tuesday.
yeah, the third Tuesday of every month, and noon Mountain Time. So if you want to join us for a live session, you're more than welcome.
By the way, this is an interactive discussion and other people can join in the discussion also. It's not just
Absolutely.
a presentation. So if you'd like to join and participate, we would love to include you in our discussion.
Absolutely. Thank you.